Hello, friends. Welcome back to today's episode of So Here's the Thing podcast. Today, we are joined by two guests, which is always really fun. And we have got Brittany Elise of Brittany Elise Photography and then Whitney Bauer of Bauer Legal. And we are going to hear the inside scoop of a really interesting / terrifying situation, I think, for all online educators, as well as just entrepreneurs. And we're going to be hearing Brittany's story of having her intellectual property stolen from a fellow educator, how they handled that, and everything along with it. Now, just a little bit of context, Brittany is the owner and principal photography of Brittany Elise Photography. She has a 7-figure studio focused on serving her clients fully, as well as an educational side of her business. And then, of course, Whitney Bauer of Bauer Legal is an attorney, and she is specializing in trademarks. So I think this is going to be one of those episodes that really opens a lot of eyes and gets us thinking about how to protect ourselves and what to do when we feel like the unthinkable is happening. And I'll let them really dive into this, but I feel like it's happening more and more these days. So we've got to learn how to protect ourselves and how to get out ahead of it. And especially for those of us who are very big on collaboration, how we can handle this in a really smart and ethical way. So without any more headway onto this, let's go ahead and dive in. And Brittany, I'm going to let you tell our audience a little bit about you, and then I'd love to hear a little bit from Whitney, and then I'd love to just hear your story.
So I'm Brittany of Brittany Elise Photography, also an educator. I teach service-hearted photographers how to scale to multi-six figures with products and services, not their time. And so I have a mastermind that is a very intense program where I basically teach photographers the exact blueprint that's in my business. And that program ties into what we're going to be talking about today. But then I also have my studio as well. And there's a multitude of photographers here. And we are just honestly focused on serving moms and helping people in the entire portrait making process from start to finish. We do everything from wardrobe to designing, installing, framing for our clients.
Awesome. And then Whitney, tell us about your boutique agency.
Yeah, so I work with the Brittnys and the Lalies of the world. I work with creative entrepreneurs and really just anybody that owns a business that really needs protection in intellectual property. These days, it seems like it's everyone because we're all operating businesses that include some type of online presence. And so that's what I do. I specialize in trademarks and copyright, and really the essence of what I do is I'm a protector and I teach business owners how to protect themselves. So that's what I do. It's about being proactive, starting from the beginning, and making sure that you're doing the things right from the beginning.
I love that. So needed. And I'm so excited to jump in to this topic with you guys. So Brittany, okay, let's dive in. Tell us about everything that happened.
For sure. I had a lot of people reaching out to me to start teaching. I wanted to go learn how to be a better educator through, much like what you do, educating educators. So I started doing some mentoring and then eventually launched a mastermind. I launched that mastermind going into 2020, going into COVID, which was a wonderful thing because it created such an amazing community during that really hard time. And I've gone on since and coached it every single year. I've put over 100 people through the program now. But in a nutshell, I had mentored someone leading up to the launch of that mastermind. And I was really new. I never had launched a mastermind, didn't know anything about really honestly other than creating content and all the things. And so I had mentored somebody, and just shortly after that first year I coached, I had forged these amazing relationships with the first 2 groups of women that came through. And sure enough, about a year later, some of them started messaging me and they were just like, Brittany, have you seen this? Have you seen this post? This is a carbon copy of what you've been teaching us. Something's just not right. And I love that they were looking out for me in the moment. I was trying really hard to just, be above it. I'm very much like a blinders type of person. I have a lot of self-control. I don't look at things that I know will start to make me waver and question myself. And so I was like, that's great. Good for her, allowing this person to go on and do whatever it is that they're doing. And so sure enough, about 2 years into teaching, a year after that started, I had some people who had taken her program take my program. And that's where I started to get a little concerned, because I had people coming to me saying, Brittany, I took this program and I didn't understand why I didn't have this success. I wasn't getting the help I needed. I wasn't getting the questions answered that I had. And now I'm looking at what you're teaching and everything makes sense. Like, you explain because I developed the content. It was my content. I literally am operating this in my business on a daily basis, so I can answer all these questions. I can tell you how these dots all connect. And, so some of my students were just like, you really need to look into this. Like, really, again, like, people looking out for me. And I was really just, again, blinders on. And so started to sort of lift the lid of this situation I was in and realizing, like, holy cow, like, my content was being stolen right out from under me by a past student. So I started to do some research, found Whitney, thank God, found Whitney. And Whitney really empowered me to be able to legally protect my content and to get my ducks in a row for all the things that I hadn't done. And at this point, I was 2.5, 3 years into teaching. And so this wasn't just, a course that I did and maybe I was going to pump it through a couple of times. Like, no, this is like my full-fledged blueprint of my business. I live and breathe this. I pour my soul into my students. And so, so Whitney, I'm sure, can share a little bit more from that.
Well, it just makes me think about, when we went back and looked, we were looking at like the bare bones. And this makes me think about, what both of you do on a daily basis, because you have your programs, and then what your audience, I'm sure, is wanting to know about. Of course, we went through Brittany's trademarks, and then we got her content copyright protected with the copyright.gov office. That was the technical steps. But one of the other things that I think that people are overlooking a lot is that checkout page when your course is purchased. And this is not the situation with Brittany, because hers didn't come from the person purchasing her course. It came from a mentee. But if you're creating a course, that's one of the first things that we get in order is that checkout page, because when they purchase the course, there need to be some provisions in place to where you can go back on them. Of course, copyright, of course, trademark, but there needs to be a third thing, and that's those purchase terms. I don't want to bore you guys with all those details, but I think that that is something that's really important that we forget. We are using, I say we as in the audience and me too, because I've had a course before too. You think about, you're finally at that point where you've created your masterpiece and you get to that checkout page and you are so tired, because that's usually the point where you're just like, oh my gosh, this has just got to be launched. I can't deal anymore. You're not thinking about the terms of purchase and what those purchase terms are. And you're using that blanket purchase term language that Podia or Kaja, I don't know what platforms you guys prefer, but whatever it is, they'll give you a blanket form for that. A lot of times it's not sufficient. So that's an additional way. Obviously, we're going to trademark the source. We're going to copyright the content, but that terms of purchase is huge for you guys. So don't overlook that. That's the first thing that just, I'm thinking that the whole time that you're talking is, I'm like, that's always my number one thing is I want to read what that says, because you're creating a contract with the person that's purchasing your course. So I don't know if there's additional questions about that, but that's one of the biggest things that goes through my head when I see like a course creator. Like I said, Brittany's situation was different because hers was just completely stolen and lifted and copied. So we had to take several routes to get to the same result there, but you want to have all those options available to you.
Yeah. How does one find, would it be hiring someone like you, or are there templates? Like, where do people find sufficient terms?
There are templates, and I work with a lot of course creators, and I like to customize their checkout, their purchase terms, because it's different for everyone. Some people are practitioners. I work with people, let's say they're a licensed family therapist and they're doing a course. Their purchase terms are going to be different. They're essentially, it's a contract that you're creating with your students. And it depends on who your student is. If your student is another photographer, that's one thing. If your student is a mom that's learning the foundations of raising a teenager, or, I'm just making a class here, but it's a different audience, and that contract needs to be a little bit different. And so thinking about that final click, and it's a little click, you're clicking a square, but thinking about the language in that part, you're creating an agreement there. And that agreement can really make or break your ability to pursue remedies against someone that steals your content. So I want us to all think about that, put more thought into that. Of course, if anyone's listening, I'm happy and would love to work with you. But that's one thing, whoever you work with, to think about is that little, what's in that button? That's always what I say when anybody comes to me about these kind of issues. Brittany's, like I said, was different, but I'm like, well, what's in the contract? That terms of purchase is a contract. So what's it say? I want to read it word for
Yeah.
word.
And my unique situation was, at the time, I was so new. I didn't have that contract in place. And even the contract I had the first, second, third year is a different contract than what I have now because of Whitney. So I remember, Whitney, when we got on the call and I explained to you everything that happened, and I was so afraid of, just more than anything, I didn't want to hinder someone's ability to teach. And at the same time, it was very clear that things had been stolen from me. And then as we really started to peel back, like, factual things, we could see identical structures, identical theories and concepts that I teach. But Whitney, you said to me on the call, and I'll never forget this, I was like, this is the simplest way, but it is exactly what happened to me. You said to me, it's like she took the ingredients, but she doesn't have your recipe. And it's why all these people, she put, literally, we could see over 200 people had come through this program. And so if you think about it, she was making money, a significant amount of money, on content that I had developed. And from what we possibly know is that there were other educators that content was looped in there too, that there wasn't just me, there was other people who had been also stolen from. So, but I got my copyright, which was kind of a lengthy process because my program is so extensive and it is so in-depth. I teach 8 2-hour classes. So if you can imagine the amount of content that is in there. And this is like a true mastermind. This isn't just a course, And so I got all of that content registered. And once I had the registration, then Whitney was able to really protect me. And then, of course, now it's under the trademark as well. But I had to obviously go and do the work, but I've now learned the hard way. Every single thing I've produced, I have registered, and I do it before I even teach it. And so, when I spoke at the conference I saw you at, Laylee, that particular presentation, I registered the copyright to that before I even taught it. In the event that, again, people go and they sit in on these things and they see a concept of something you taught, and then they kind of tweak it or make it their own, but it's still the concept of what you created. So protecting that is so important. Literally, I've registered every single opt-in, every single freebie, every single, if I've poured my heart into it and it's something that is my content, you just got to go do it.
So I want to just clarify a little bit so that your listeners will know. So the trademark registration process, well, it's a lot more involved as far as there's argument involved there. I actually am up against an examiner there, an attorney examiner. So we have 2 of Brittany's registered right now. We have 2 more that we're finalizing. That is a lengthier process. I'd say a year and a half. The copyright process is also something that I can do, but I really like to empower my clients to get on a rotation of consistently registering their works, their copyrighted works. And that is something that's done through the copyright.gov office, but you're not assigned an attorney examiner there. It is more secretarial and rubber stamp than the trademark process. The trademark process is different, and the trademark is you're protecting the names of your programs, the names of your business. You're protecting those things, and that can last forever. A copyright protects the content, like your PDFs, your freebies, all the things. If you use photos in there, especially important for a photographer, especially with photographers, I love for them to get on a rotation of every 90 days, really examining what matters out of this, what could someone take and try to make money on. That's really the practical question you ask yourself. Can someone take this freebie and try to make money on this freebie? To you, it's a freebie, but to that person, they may be using it and selling it on Fiverr, or however you say that, for $9 and then multiplying it. So that's kind of really what I like to develop for people. Trademark, I don't recommend trying it yourself. It's just really tricky. It's nuanced. It's wonky. My trademark colleagues all over the country and we just laugh together because sometimes we're scratching our heads like we know the law, and sometimes we're like, did they need a sandwich that day? What were they doing? The examiners can be a little crazy, but copyright is a lot more rubber stamped. So it's a different process. And I don't want to go, on and on about that, but I just wanted you to kind of understand that those two things, though, are essential. Like, you need them both.
If I had to guess, just in the world of working with other educators and creatives that are teaching, I have shared this story and been like, have you copyrighted any of this? Like, I've had casual conversations of, oh, this girl's just teaching exactly what I'm teaching. And I'm like, well, have you copyrighted your program? Like, have you formulated what it is that you do and what you're teaching and protected it? And I have yet to meet another educator that has protected their content. And I'm serious. And so I know, Whitney, I've referred a few people to you because I know they're incredible educators and that they've had similar things happen to them. What's happened to me has happened to them. But it's something that I just feel like, having been through this and realizing how much this impacted me, and also more than anything, our community, the community of photographers. If you think about 200 plus people who went through a program that was basically falsely created and taught on content she really didn't know and understand. If I had to venture to guess, there was probably several hundreds of thousands of dollars, in a sense, that was stolen from those people. And, they bought something in a very, they're very misled. So if anything, it's like, this isn't just protecting us. This is really protecting the community as a whole. And even in, the space of like, just thinking about going into a program and knowing that an educator is going through these steps to protect themselves, I think it does speak volumes about how important their content is to them. Somebody who has really poured into a program that has a ton of value, they're going to take these steps to hire somebody like Whitney to protect it. And I think it is a bit of a reflection of what you are investing in as well. And so I really hope that from this, whether you trademark something, you at minimum go and register your copy and protect your content.
There are people that will say, especially with photographers, that they'll say the copyright exists when you create the work. That is so true. But the reason that we register it is because that's where your legal remedies come in. So if it's not registered, you don't have the ability to sue the other person in federal court. It takes away a large part of the remedies that are available to you. So that's why you want to get registered. There's also a new thing. It's like kind of a small claims division for copyright, and you can do everything electronically. If you have a registration and there is someone that violates your copyright, then you can do everything electronically. And you can say, obviously you'd send them a cease and desist first, and you'd send a demand letter, all that stuff. But there's a way that you can do it electronically. If you have somebody that you want to say, hey, you owe me for whatever this is, then, if you're registered, you have more rights. And that's probably the biggest part of it is, yes, your copyright already exists when you create the work and put it out there, but what can you do about it if someone takes it from you?
Yeah, I feel like there's so much that people don't know about that. And I'm so glad that you shared the difference, because I hear very often like, hey, how did you trademark the name of your business? And I think that's just the only thing that people know to talk about is the trademark. So I'm so glad that you shared that. And I just had a couple follow-up questions. One would be, I feel like, as Brittany mentioned, as somebody who is an educator for educators, I get this question a lot from my students. Like, what do I do if somebody's stealing from me? What do I do? And of course, like, I have what I answer them with, but a lot of the times I come back with the question of, how do you know what they've stolen? So Brittany, I guess my question for you and Whitney is, what was the process like for you to uncover that it was actually stolen versus somebody taking like an idea and running with it? Because that does happen. And sometimes we get really defensive of our work, when I just think that there's like a line, right? Where does that line fall and how do you uncover it between inspiration and stealing?
Yeah. So, well, there's specific things within my program, not just concepts, but specific offers and structures of what I do within the blueprint of my business at certain points within that. Those were mirrored, like identical. And so the other thing was there was a freebie on her website that was basically not the same verbatim. I mean, it wasn't like copy and paste plagiarism, but essentially I had an opt-in on my website that I actually worked with a copywriter. And we actually sat down, me and this copywriter, and we thought through everything about our ideal client. And we talked through probably 10 different freebies before we developed this freebie that sat on my website. So she took that same concept, changed the verbiage, but in the download was almost the identical steps. And so this was something that was public. This was something forward facing that like wasn't hidden behind a checkout page. And I had the registered copyright to my freebie. And, Whitney was like, we can just start the ball. I mean, we can just roll the ball. I mean, certainly like this is in the grand scheme of this whole thing, this freebie is really just the tip of the iceberg, but it's enough that we can get the ball rolling to scare her basically of what she has taken to really get her to realize and recognize that, hey, we have our ducks in a row. We've registered the copy and we know what's happening behind the scenes. And we'd like for you to take it down before things get ugly, basically, is essentially it. And so a cease and desist happened that Whitney sent. I was really surprised. I guess I should say I was not surprised to see that there was a reply. Whitney, I think you sent the cease and desist on like a Friday afternoon. And we had a response
quickly
Monday, like by Monday. And that, I don't know if I ever shared this, and maybe I'm curious to get your opinion, but like that tipped me off that she had already acquired an attorney. Because how would you have found an attorney within a weekend?
What that, or it's a family person, but I think wasn't there the thought that maybe this was going on with somebody else too? Like,
correct. There was some potential template theft that I had heard about through other circles, that there was other educators that were finding their templates within her content.
Was it active litigation or was it just?
From what I understood, those templates were not registered copyright. And so it made it a little bit more challenging for them. Whereas I think what happened in our situation, it was a little scarier for them because it was like, hey, you're in violation. We can see this publicly. And you were like, and we have also this registered copyright that we also could act upon as well, and, obviously said in a much more like legal way than that. But I think that was the situation there, was that she's just like, okay, fine, I'll take the templates off. I'll remove the templates. I'll create a different template. Whereas this was like essentially the meat of her program was this content.
So you mentioned the cease and desist, the people who had their templates stolen, they don't have theirs registered. So what would be, let's say someone who's listening to this is experiencing that, what steps can they take? Like what action can they take to respond if their content does get stolen?
I'm going to give you the really classic lawyer answer is it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on what was taken, how it was taken, what kind of legal protections are in place for that. Is it someone using your name? Is it someone infringing on your trademark? Or is it someone infringing on your copyright? Are those copyrights registered as your trademark register? I mean, there's a whole kind of gamut that you have to really go down and analyze and think about. But that's why I push for the registration of both trademark and copyright, because that gives you the ultimate. But, if you want to look at this simply and you don't want to immediately go like, I'm hiring a lawyer right now and we're threatening to sue them, because essentially a cease and desist is a demand. I have to either say that we're going to sue them, say that we demand a certain amount. I mean, there is an element of demand in there. So if you don't want to go straight to that, there's nothing that says that you can't say to a person, of course, keep the record of it, the email or whatever you send. But if you don't immediately want to hire counsel, you can say, this violates my copyright. These are my demands. Take it down. You can do a demand on your own without hiring counsel. There's nothing about a cease and desist that, like, no one has, other than my law degree and my law license, but no one comes to my door and gives me a ticket that says I can send out these letters. You know, I mean, I've got the legal backing, obviously, so I know what I'm talking about. But like, if your rights are being taken, if your copyright is being infringed upon, you can make contact with that person. If you don't want to immediately go to a lawyer and lawyer up, hire counsel, you don't have to do that. You can say, hey, this is mine. What are you doing? And you can do it in a respectful way that asks for an answer. And when someone does that, I always say, you're making a demand, and that demand should be an answer by, I need an answer by Friday, August 10th, or whatever the day is, you know, and that gives them a limit. And then that also says, hey, if I don't have an answer by then I'll be pursuing legal action. Whether that's retaining counsel, I'll be retaining counsel and pursuing legal action. That gives you a step one, and you can see how they're going to react, because some people might just take it down. I mean, now the other question is, how egregious was the infringement? Like, did they steal a photo and sell it to Martha Stewart magazine? And I don't know. Like, it really depends on the level of infringement, because you're kind of evaluating for, okay, what would I eventually recover here as a practical matter? Like, you factor in, okay, litigating this is going to be ridiculous. But, you know, Brittany has had such success with her program that it is a large amount to have that stolen from you. And then when you know that the other person has taken that information and has made, you know, a lot of sales off of this, you're looking at a lot of exposure for that person, meaning a lot of money that she would have to pay out. And so you evaluate it on a case by case basis, but you can take that step one before retaining counsel. And that gives you at least an answer of what direction it's going to go.
I think that's so helpful. Yeah, it's so good to know that there is an option to take action in some way. I mean, I don't know anybody who's been in business as long as I have and hasn't had to send some kind of email that's like, hey, this is word for, I mean, I remember, I think it was like 6 years ago, my website copy was stolen, as well as like the formatting. And I mean, it was just some young new entrepreneur, and I was like, hey, I'm sure you didn't mean anything malicious, but this copy paste is wrong, you know, and they took it down. But I mean, education, I think, is a whole other beast, and a whole other, like you said, Brittany, it's your heart and your soul, and you're pouring all of your knowledge into it. I will say, just as a quick double down on something you said at the very beginning, is that that educator had a really hard time making her content work because she didn't have your brain. She just had what she took. So I love that you shared that.
And I think that that was also like my feeling, especially in the beginning, was that, you know, I've had very similar things happen in my photography business. I had pretty aggressive theft of things to the point where it's almost alarming, where my website was copied. And I've had some pretty frustrating things that in those circumstances, this other local photographer to me that literally, I mean, like, just to like give a glimmer, like, she hired the people that I coached with, that I mentored with. And then she actually moved into my old studio. Her husband
Stop.
bought my building, and she moved into my old studio. I didn't share about it for years because I just didn't want to be gossipy. I didn't want to be, you know, I just wanted to be above it. But I remember I talked to a good friend at the time who'd been in business for like a decade longer, you know, than me. And he was like, Brittany, anyone who has to go to this extent to find success will not find success. He's like, if you have to literally copy every single footstep, first of all, it doesn't make you a creative. And second of all, they won't ever truly be able to evolve. And so I try to remember that. And I think that ultimately, as like the dust settled from all of this, like her true cards showed. And it was so hard for me because in the background, I stayed quiet for a really long time. And I didn't really feel strong enough or empowered enough to protect myself until I started to see these people that had basically been victims of this. And so I want to like encourage people to not look at it as like, hey, I'm going to like hurt this person who maybe is trying to start and they feel really inspired by me. Because we do have that feeling inside and we want to be an inspiration to others, but also think about the people that are going to come through what it is that they're creating, and they're not going to be able to serve them well. And that's where, like, for me, it really just like hurt the most was that knowing that I had students who really had like lost a lot of time, lost a lot of money, trialing and erroring what she didn't really know how to teach. So
That's so true. I feel like that speaks so highly of how you are as a person, Brittany. And that's why I really wanted you to come on and share your story, as well as Whitney, because I know anyone that works with you would have the same outlook of you are just so invested in your community and you have a very generous heart when it comes to education. That is something I picked up about you from day one. So I'm so glad you shared that piece of it, because I think so often people can mistake that kindness for weakness. And I love that you were strong enough to stand up and say, like, this is wrong. And it's wrong not only from the perspective that's hurting you, but it's also hurting all the people that are basically wasting their money on somebody who has no business selling this knowledge that isn't theirs. So I'd love to hear, like, as we wrap up the episode, I think it would be great to hear like the top thing you want people to know when it comes to protecting themselves, when it comes to content being stolen, like the one thing you wish you could go back in time and tell yourself, or that you just really hope people walk away with on this.
I'm sure Whitney is going to have great things to add too. One is that I think people fear that you're going to step on someone's toes or that you're going to come across as unfriendly. But there's nothing unfriendly about protecting the house you built. There's nothing, that is something that you have to do for yourself. And if I could go back in time and do one thing, it would have been to, one, do what Whitney said and to reach out to her and say, hey, I know that I taught you a while ago. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, that what I taught you is not yours to reteach. She actually reached out to me and mentioned to me that she was going to teach. Now, what she told me she was going to teach was very different. but I should have taken that extra step of, hey, I'm so excited for you, just to be sure we're on the same page. The content that I taught you is my intellectual property, so please be sure to not include that in what it is that you're moving forward with. Congratulations, wish you all the best, right?
Well, it's hard when she set you up. It's really hard when she set you up, probably with misleading.
She made it sound like she was teaching something totally different. So I really wish that I had done that. And then secondly, of just registering my copy, because again, like in the situation, like Whitney was explaining, I mean, sure, you can send somebody something, but you send this and let's say they don't take it down. Yeah. Well, now this is an argument of he said, she said, right? And now there's no proof of when this content was originating to you and said by the US government, this is your date. So, we were able to go back to literally the first transaction I ever had teaching this content and saying, hey, this is the original date of this intellectual property that she created. And so, number one, reach out to them. Number two, go get it registered, because again, like that's only going to take you so far. And if somebody's not threatened by you and they're just going to move on with their day, there isn't something that Whitney has to protect you, So that's like my two biggest tips. So, and then also my third tip is just to like go to Whitney because she's the best. I did a lot of digging on IP attorneys. I did a consultation with her, which I loved. I was able to like feel out our personalities, make sure that I vibed well with her. Yeah, she's the best.
Thank you. Thank you. You have all the things together, but the only thing I want to add to that is one thing that can help you if you have, someone that's learning from you or someone that's bought a course from you, that uneasy thing of like, you don't want to seem mean. I'm like that too. I don't like to be mean, which is weird because I have a job where I kind of have to do that sometimes. But the way that you can stop yourself is from the beginning. Like I was saying, that terms of purchase, if you have that in the beginning or that relationship, that contract that's created by the person that purchases your course or that you work with, whether it's a mentee or whatever, if there is some kind of really strong agreement from the get-go, then you really don't have to be a bad guy because those are the parameters that were set from the beginning. And so you're just like, hey, remember when we signed this thing that says all these terms? And that way it keeps you from having to be the bad guy and make the contract be the bad guy. These are the terms. And then I find myself always, because I'm just naturally a people pleaser, like, even when I'm drafting a cease and desist, I have to remind myself, like, this is the registration, this is the trademark, this is the copyright, like, these are the terms. This is the contract. This is when they purchase this. This is what's in there. And it takes the emotion out of it. You're like, this is what the deal is. And this is what we're all going to follow. And I gave you what I said that I would give you when I sold you the course, an amazing course that teaches you lots of things. And then you're going to take the information and use it for your photography business instead of teaching other photographers what I taught you. Yeah, make those terms really clear. And that's something that everyone, before they click that launch button, needs to see what those terms are currently, because you have something in place. Whether, I don't know, Laylee, what system do you like to use to create
I
on?
use Kajabi.
Okay, yeah. So Kajabi will have a terms of purchase. They'll have the button, and then Brittany, I think do you do Kajabi or Podia?
So I'm on Podia, and I actually have a separate contract. I've always had a separate contract, which you helped me really beef up and clarify a few areas of, just making sure it was really buttoned up. But actually, there was somebody who came from my program who did decide to teach and told me she was going to teach, but she was teaching something totally different. And I did exactly what you said. Just a reminder, here was the agreement that we had regarding what I taught you. And it was like the contract got to be the bad guy in that situation. She was really nice to at least tell me, hey, I'm going to be teaching something completely different, but wanted just to be upfront with you. But yeah, I have a contract on top of that button.
Yes. And obviously I advise that. I think the clicky button, the square box, is the smallest amount of protection that you need. But if you can do an electronic signature contract thrown in with your checkout process, that's always going to be so beneficial, because those terms in there, you can really customize. Like I said, customize it to who's buying the course, what that relationship is, and what they can and can't do with that information that they're learning.
Right. And I think it's such a great tip to do that. Like you said, the baseline is the terms. And I think for me, for example, my courses would have the terms box, but my mastermind, my one-on-one coaching, all of that has a very full lengthy contract that I send through Honeybook. So I do also have I feel like I have tiers based off of what the product is. So that's something to note too for everybody.
That's so smart. It's so smart. And it's multiple things, thinking about your audience, thinking about those terms. That's very, very smart.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your story, and Brittany for being so open to it, because I know that it was really hard to go through, but being on the other side. And I don't know, I always feel like it's great to use the painful things to help others grow. And I know that that's something that you care about. So I really appreciate you doing that for our audience today.
I'm really honored to be on here, Laylee. I'm now in your lounge, your educator lounge.
Yay,
so
yes.
I'm excited. Yes.
Oh my gosh,
I'm
honored about that. Thank you guys so much. And guys, we will link Whitney so that if you want to connect with her and utilize her services. And then of course I will link Brittany, because she's an incredible, incredible person to follow as well. So thank you guys so much for being on today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So great. Appreciate it.